Good evening to you all. It's been about a week since I've been here with you all, Brother Damon Chief Jones, and this topic will be on law enforcement and an author of a law enforcement book. And I'd like to get him to introduce himself now. If you'll tell us who you are.
Yes, my name is Robert Phillips.
Okay. And are you in law enforcement?
I'm retired from law enforcement. I worked 30 years with one of the sheriff's office located in central Alabama.
Okay, thank you for your service.
Appreciate it.
As you know, I retired also.
Yes, sir.
Okay, it'll kind of be like two old farts, old cops that are retired talking shop a little bit here. But
yes, sir.
There's a lot of things going on in the YouTube and alternate media these days called audits. Are you familiar with what an audit is?
I am familiar. That's where a person, they'll go and they'll film a public building to try to draw people out, so to speak.
Right. So would you say that is a constitutionally protected activity?
As long as the person isn't breaking any laws, such as disorderly conduct, like being in the street,
right,
or being overly loud, as the Alabama code reads, for disorderly conduct or profane language. As long as they're just filming, they're really within their right to film a public building. It's like going to a park and filming a fountain or a statue, really.
Okay. So you've been in for 30 years, but this is something that's evolved in probably the last 20 years with a nano focus in the last 5 in the alternate media. And I look at it like it's a test of the system to make sure that government servants know what their job is, know what the law is, and treat the people fairly and equitably. Now, with that said, have you or people in your agency or nearby agencies experienced audits in the last 5 or so years?
Well, when I worked, we never had any actual cases such as where my deputies went. I was a supervisor. I was promoted in 2006, so I was a supervisor for the last half of my career. And none of my deputies that worked for me ever answered a call such as that. The big thing that we ran into, Alabama is an open carry state.
Right.
And so you would have folks that would have their sidearm, their handgun on their hip, and they would set to where it could be seen. Especially, they would come in like a restaurant where we were eating, something like that, and they would always try to get us to say something to them. When I ran into stuff like that, I'd say, "Hey, how you doing? Is that the 40 caliber Glock, or what you got there?" You know, that kind of thing. I would never challenge them to say, "Hey, do you have a permit?" or anything like that.
Yeah,
I would just make general conversation with them, and generally they would come back with, friendly general conversation to me also.
Right.
As far as the audit, I'd never, or none of my deputies had ever run into it while I was working.
Okay. Well, that's fair, but there's a thing called, well, that is part of the audit, but I would call it, where the other things is what they call a First Amendment audit, but there's audits of the Constitution throughout the whole thing, like search and seizure, a Terry frisk, when can you do it, and how far can you go in it, and how long can you detain somebody before they're arrested, etc. But the another big thing that you get here in Alabama and in Texas alike is these open carry. And that's another amendment to where people will open carry in a public access area. And in the public access area, if they happen to see police, they may walk very near them, but not up on them, so they wouldn't, quote, be alarmed or scared, but they would pass by them and see if the police will, let's say, take a bite on the bait and start questioning them or not. So it sounds like you did a great job in that area, and I want to thank you for your service, and thank you for not what we call government overreach or doing people wrong, questioning them when there's no lawful reason to do so. And I think you handled it well, and I think you've done things like I've done, and just make a gesture about what type of weapon they're carrying, or that's a nice looking handgun you got there, or an excellent holster.
Yes, sir.
Because that can do something really unique that most people don't know about, which is common sense. Is going to tell you the demeanor, and the demeanor is either going to remain the same or change. And you're going to know if they're a friend or a foe, so to speak, if they have ill intentions or not by that question. They may say, "I don't want to talk to you." Well, okay, have a nice day.
That's right.
But if they're, maybe arrogant or cocky, or if they have an ill intention, if you say something about the gun and they had an ill intention and they go to reach for it, well, it's on, like Donkey Kong.
That's it. That's the story.
I'd rather be tried by 12 than carried by 6. It's a lot of crazy people out here, and in my opinion, law enforcement has a very fine line to work on. I think we basically had a telephone line, which is decent in size for many years, but it got smaller and smaller to where it's maybe one good, strong bungee cord, if you will, or something, to where if we don't do something, we're in trouble. If we do too much, we're in trouble. We got to know how to maintain professionally that middle ground. So let me ask you another question that has come up a lot about older policemen and younger policemen, and more specifically about the pre 9/11 and the post 9/11 law enforcement community. What is your thoughts about the police, how they were trained and how they acted before 9/11 versus after 9/11? I'll let you have the floor.
Okay. Pre 9/11, police's training was more hands-on. There was more active training as far as patrol techniques, how you showed a person how to police. After 9/11, it seems like it's more textbook training. There's not as much practical training and physical training as far as teaching a person. There's more computer. They have a computer in the car nowadays that they do their reports on, and the computer also tells them where to police. And the computer gets the information that's been downloaded from a clerk or something like that, from clerks and stuff like that download this information. Well, before 9/11, we rode our territory, and we saw something that was out of place, we investigated it. Nowadays, these guys basically follow direction from the box that's in the car.
It took a lot of the humanism and personal touch out of it.
Yes, it did. Yes, it did.
Well,
when I got training car. They put me one of the older deputies that had been working for years, and he showed you how to police.
Right.
He showed you how to you hone your skills to talk to people, and it helped me out for during the course of my career. I was a detective for 6 years, over 6 years, with the sheriff's office,
right,
and investigating property crimes.
Well, let me ask you another question. After 9/11, did you notice that the police were becoming militarized exponentially fast, and at some points you cannot tell a police officer dang near from a military soldier by the gear that they wear?
Oh yes, the gear that's issued to us, the vest, they have helmets, the military style helmets.
Right.
Nowadays in the cars, there's a lot of equipment that's available from the government to law enforcement agencies to help the officer equip for instance, for us, we rode one-man vehicle, and we had some pretty good sized beats. The beat I worked when I was a deputy was probably about 20 square miles, and it was just me by myself. My closest backup would be 10, 12, 15 minutes, and that's on a good night.
Right. I've been there. Well, what I'm thinking, and you can tell me if you agree. Sometimes I don't ask the best questions or the right way, but back after 9/11, I was very near Tallahassee, and I was working just down the road. And in fact, I had been at the regional airport maybe 1 or 2 days beforehand, and I think it might have been 3 days afterwards that I had occasion to be back there to take somebody to the airport or pick somebody up. I can't recall. But just a couple days before, it was one particular way, and it was the same way it was in basically 1950. They're just, if I don't know if the airport was there, I suppose. But anyway, it was the old ways where there was security, there was checking. I wouldn't even say it was lax. It just wasn't hyped up. But the day I went there, I seen military jeeps. I actually saw a tank out there. I saw military police and other police walking inside and outside of the building. I saw them walking up and down the corridors. And there's no way you can convince me that people that readily accepted that would have done so without the attack of 9/11. In other words, they let the military go into civilian places and basically conduct or semi-conduct law enforcement functions, which is in violation of the Posse Comitatus Act. But they would always say, well, we're just support. But they was doing more than support. They actually was taking some people into custody, quote, we're holding them for law enforcement. Well, you're taking a law enforcement measure that nobody else can take. And the people that human resources or the chiefs or sheriffs were hiring by, say, that was in 2001, by 2003, 2004, so we're looking 14, 15 years ago, they were hiring men and women, but predominantly men, and they were coming back from Iraq, Afghanistan, and Pakistan. They were on a war footing, and they even had no time to decompress. So they brought their military skill set and their military mindset and a war footing mindset and went to work for police departments, sheriff's offices, marshals, constables across the country. And it seems like to me that they're overzealous and they're treating civilians many times like they're on a military reservation or in a combat area. What's your thoughts?
I see what you're saying, Chief. Yes, I'll agree with you. They came from an area where everyone was a bad guy, and they put them in an area where not everybody was a bad guy, and there were a lot of them that didn't know how to conduct themselves with people, talk to people, so to speak, and that's a big part of law enforcement is talking to people and learning to read them and stuff like that. And I was a field training officer, FTO, for a while, and I was also a supervisor over the field training officers. And I would tell the trainees when I got them on the car, and then when I was the supervisor over it, we'd meet with the guys before we put them with one of the FTO deputies, and I would tell these guys, we talk to people like we're talking to our grandmother, and you know how you would want someone to talk to your grandmother.
Yes.
And they would nod their head yes. And I said, we talk to them like we're talking to our grandmother until we have to do otherwise.
Well, my first two trainers, and I'm going back and forth. I don't know if I can't remember now if one was on vacation and he had been around a while and had a lot of vacation or sick or what. But anyway, I went back and forth between two in 1978 when I was getting started as a cadet. And they both told me the same thing, but one of them was a little more aggressive about his teaching style. And he said something very similar to what you said, so it puts me in mind of it. He said, look, when you stop some man or woman, that's somebody's daddy, brother, son, grandson, mother, aunt, uncle, cousin. And would you want a policeman that has basically life and death in his authority and the badge of his office, which is the public trust, would you want them to abuse that or misuse it or intimidate, hinder, harass any of you or your parents or grandparents or your relatives? I said, absolutely not. That would infuriate me. He said, well, it infuriates everybody else too. So here's the rule. We treat everybody like family to start with. Now, we have a job to do, and if we have to arrest somebody, we will, but that's a last resort, not a first resort. And if we have to shoot somebody to stop them from killing us or killing somebody else, we need to be prepared to do it. We don't look forward to it. We don't want it to ever happen. If it does, you just have to have a made-up mind that you'll do that to protect yourself and your community. But don't be quick on the draw. Don't talk down to people. If a situation goes south really fast, you can escalate exponentially quick. But you need to stay on a level one, and that's the way this teaching level 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You know, like your mere appearance is a 1. A talking is, basically level 2. And so long as they're talking to you, y'all got some kind of communication going, you're there. Number 3 is if you got to start making or giving commands, like, do this, don't do that. And then that's when you got to make a determination if there's going to be a limited detention or not. And me, we never, ever escalate. We were taught to de-escalate. That if we got there and the man or woman was irate, to do the best we could. There were certain words, phrases, body language to tell them,
Tone of voice.
yeah, tone it down a little bit so that we can talk and see if we can't work this thing out so that we could go from a 3 or a potential 4 back down to a 2 where we're talking without having to give commands. Let's just go down to a 2. And I see that these days I see police. I've seen them in real life, and I've seen them on TV. I've seen them on videos on YouTube and other platforms repeatedly. The moment they get where they're going, I'm not saying that they can't ask anybody for ID, but there's no need to unless they're actually committing a crime. What's your thoughts?
I agree with you. Like I said earlier, they were in the street, blocking traffic, being overly loud, profane language.
Right.
If they were in some type of state code, then yes, you have a need to ID them. But as long as they're just there taking a picture of a building, they're not breaking any law. It's the same as being in the park and taking pictures, like I said, of the statue or the fountain or the scenery, so to speak.
Yeah, that's an excellent explanation. Well said. Now, so in your training and the people around you and in your subordinates when you become a supervisor, y'all were trained treat a man and treat a woman with dignity and respect, to handle each situation like a fingerprint, being very unique and very different, no two alike, use a lot of common sense, logic, and wisdom, and kind of balance out what's right and wrong, and be cautious not to violate anybody's constitutional right. Is that what I'm hearing from you?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, that is correct.
All right. Now, I want to ask you, you have written a book, correct?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay. And tell us the name of the book, please.
The name of the book is Pigtails. Pigtales.
Pigtails. In law enforcement?
Stories of law enforcement.
Okay. I will put I'll put a link. I know where to go. I'll put a link in my video where the people can find. So that way they won't have to look all over the internet, because when I first heard this a couple of days ago, I looked up and I found numerous books about pigtails, and some of them were children's books and all sort of things. But I think I found it where it said pigtails, stories in law enforcement or something like that, and I finally found it. But we don't know nobody to give up. Now, my next question is, why did you decide to write this book?
Well, I wrote this book in part. My dad he was a great storyteller, and he would always tell us stories about when he was growing up, things that happened to him and his dad and stuff like that. And, we always said, "Oh, Dad, those ought to be in a book, you need to write a book." And he said, yeah, I need to write a book. He said, "I'm going to write a book one day." Well, I lost my dad about 4.5 years ago, and it was before he ever had a chance. He was taken by an infection that just swept through his body and in about 3 weeks. And he never had a chance to put pen to paper. And so I was sitting on a extra job and just started jotting down stories about calls that I'd had and that I'd went on, and experiences that I had with the sheriff's office, and it just kind of went from there.
Okay, so these are actually true stories, correct?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay, like on Dragnet, you may have changed the names to protect the innocent, and you might not give an exact geographic location, but you gave all the basic pertinent just the facts, right?
That's it. That's exactly right.
And I mean, you did it in your own words, and I mean, I guess it comes to life. So if somebody reads it, they'll say, I can kind of visualize what Mr. Phillips is writing here.
Yes,
Okay.
sir. Now, I will tell you that I toned it down. I guess you could say cleaned it up, so to speak.
Right.
Policing, law enforcement, it can be kind of a harsh job, and there's a lot of times there are some harsh things that we see.
Yes.
Harsh things that are said, and like I said, I cleaned it up. As my wife asked me, would our preacher be able to read it? And I said, yes, he would.
Okay.
Because if I was raw and first hand, there would be probably people that probably make sailors blush, so to speak.
Yes, and that brought up another quick question that come to my mind. In court, they have hearsay, and then they have firsthand testimony, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and firsthand, eyewitness, ear witness, firsthand testimony is what the courts see as the absolute best and most reliable, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. A lot of people ask all the time about that, and I thought that was a no-brainer, but I figured I would just ask you while we was here. Now, what do you want the people to get out of this book?
Well, I want people to get humor out of it. I tried to pick the stories that were the most humorous that I had dealt with, because I want them to see that we are human and there is a humorous side to us, and that we're not just machines that are stamped out at an academy to be just like a robotic machine, like a RoboCop or anything.
Right. Well, let me ask you something else, and I see this come up all the time. When you get, say, to a scene, or your deputy was at a scene, and there was a problem where either the deputy or the person, the man or woman they were talking to, said, I want your supervisor here. And you showed up at the request of a citizen or the deputy, and you went there, and you and the deputy go to the side to talk. Sometimes people get the impression you, me, whomever in law enforcement, it's going back there to plot on them and figure out how to, quote, jam them up, because there have been some officers caught on their body cams or dash cams on audio and video talking about how they're going to jam somebody up because they know they're dirty, and or they don't like them, or some reason they're going to abuse their office. Now, we know that these things happen. This is the real world, and there's bad cops just like there's bad carpenters and bad bankers and plumbers, electricians. There's good and bad in everything. But
that's correct.
But for you and I and the average cop out there, when we go to the back of the car or we step 10 or 15 foot away from somebody to discuss a situation, what would you say we're trying to accomplish, and what might we say to each other out of earshot of the other to come to an agreement among ourselves? What do we talk about?
We're talking about to the officer. We want both sides of the story, and generally, when someone said, "I want to talk to your supervisor," then usually it was my deputy that called me. And so I would go to him and I would see why the person was, not satisfied with the service from them. And then I would go to the person and I would talk to them to see what their side was and to see, perhaps why they didn't like my deputy. We've actually had people call the sheriff's office and they'll say, well, Deputy X was out here and yesterday, and I don't want Deputy X out here today. Well, they don't get to pick which deputy comes out there. They get what deputy's working that beat. And
right.
I've had to explain that multiple times to folks that, if you don't want Deputy X, then you're going to have to wait till an evening shift or a night shift deputy comes on, because Deputy X works that shift on my shift and does a good job for me on that beat.
Well, what would be?
Yeah, I'm going to get sides from the people from both parties of the disagreement before I make a decision.
Have you had occasion? I've had. It seems like I've had too many, but I considered myself measured, but I've had to, as a sergeant, a captain, chief of police, I've had to go, so to speak, against the grain or against the officer on situations. Sometimes it was because of their immaturity or their lack of comprehension of a specific law that I don't think they were mean and trying to hurt nobody, but I think they contorted some law to reach over to apply to a situation. Or they misunderstood the law or their authority to do that, and I've had to tell them, you're going to have to let this man or woman go. They don't meet the elements of the offense here, and I would think you would know that. And they know this law better than you know it, and I think your ego has been hurt or damaged, or you've been challenged, and you're not used to that. You can't retaliate against them in that way. Now, that wasn't an all the time thing. It just happened here and there. Sometimes I thought it was happening more to some of my guys than others, and I think, what am I failing to teach these guys?
Yeah. Well, luckily, I never ran into it directly, but I have seen other supervisors that had ran into that kind of situation.
Right. Well, I have had to write a report on, for example, on one particular officer when I was the second in command, about him not, for example, responding to a call, and I actually had to get called out to get to a call, and he didn't have no real reasonable explanation of where he was, and this was a rape in progress call, or a possible rape in progress, and at 2 or 2:30 in the morning I get this call, your unit is not responding. So now I've got to worry about, is my guy been hijacked, or
exactly, yeah.
or is he out at the cemetery asleep? Is he in the bathroom and his radio won't get out and he can't get out of the bathroom, or what's going on with him? And then I got possibly some man raping a woman in this particular case. Well, I get out there, and it was actually, like a boyfriend-girlfriend situation, and they was hollering and so forth, and somebody took it that he was trying to rape her. Now she claimed not. And of course, I do just right. I do a little frisk on him, a Terry frisk to make sure he has no weapons. He's good. He's clean. I get him where I keep my eye on him. I take the woman somewhere else and I talk to her and I say, look, I'll take care of this. I need to know if he hit you, pushed you, tried to rape you, what's going on? We got this report on a possible rape. And she said, no. He, me and him's been having a verbal argument. And, I had thrown some things at him. I said, okay. And so I said, did you hit him? She said, yep. So she actually was, committed battery on him, not the other way around. And I said, well, I'm going to have to ask him at this point if he wants to file charges on you. Well, he files charges on me. And I won't repeat the rest. But anyway, I asked him, did he want to file charges? He said, no, that's a crazy girl there, and I ain't got no business messing with her. She gonna get me okey doke and locked up in jail. I said, you're a smart man. I said, you leaving? He said, I'm leaving right now. Well, you can see I'm leaving, and I ain't never coming back. And so supposedly the officer, I called him on the radio 3 different times, and we had to have coverage. And I couldn't find him. So I actually had to call the chief of police and said, I'm over here on patrol, but I can't find him. He won't answer the radio. I've got a deputy over here with me, and I got a reserve officer over here I called out, and we're looking everywhere for him. You're closer to where his house is. Can you go and look? He was at home. And supposedly, it was getting pretty cold at that time of year, and he was getting a upper respiratory infection or something, and he said he went home to take care of this. And I said, well, here's the deal. You have to call dispatch. You have to tell them what the situation is. Then they have to call me and notify me that I'm going to be on call, et cetera, So, yes, you can do that. We don't expect you to work sick, but we expect to know what's going on. And if this had been a real rape in progress, by the time I found out and I could have got there, she could have been raped and dead. So this is very, very, very serious. So I had to write up a disciplinary paper on him, and he had a few other issues. He had come out of the Marines, and I recommended that initially that he not be hired because I saw a couple of yellow flags, not red flags, but yellow, and I said, why do this when we don't have to? Well, he's got this experience and that experience, and he was a drug hound from hell. He could look at a car and he just knew. And I said, well, but you can't just stop them because you just know. That ain't going to work in courts. You can't stop somebody because you know. You're like a human drug detector. But so that's a pretextual traffic stop because you're looking for a not to turn on a blinker. They got a burnout tail light. They weaved in the lane. All this stuff. I said it's going to have to be legit and fly. And if you do a legitimate traffic stop and something else evolves, okay. But I had to have several counseling sessions with him, and I wrote up numerous disciplinary papers, and I thought they're going to fire him. But over and over, there was things with the police union, with his private attorneys, and we just kept being stuck with a bad cop, which is very bad,
It is, yeah.
And what about politics? Do you think how much do you think politics is involved in law enforcement these days?
Well, I know with the sheriff's offices in the state of Alabama, the sheriff is an elected official.
Right.
So it's a big part in sheriff's offices. I know most chiefs of police, I believe, are appointed and basically work at the discretion of the mayor or a council.
Right.
But it is a big part in the sheriff's office. I see it. I've seen it in the past, and still today, even though I don't work there anymore, I still see it.
Okay. Now, how much this book you've wrote? How much will it cost somebody to get it?
Right now, the book is $13.99 plus shipping, and I say plus shipping because at this point it's only available online. It's available from iUniverse.com. iUniverse is the publisher.
Right.
And bookmillion.com, barnesandnoble.com, and Amazon Books. And like I said, the price is $13.99 plus the shipping. We are actually working to try to get it in the Books a Million. We've filled out the forms, and I'm just waiting on Books a Million to contact me and give me a thumbs up or a thumbs down. So, everybody that you have contact with, tell them to, hey, check with Books a Million and say, hey, we want that book.
Right, that would be great. Do you think there will be a volume 2 or a follow up to this?
Well, I do have a second book in mind. I guess it would be Pigtails 2, TOO. And part of what I want to do in the second one is get with buddies that are in law enforcement and get some of their stories along with mine, and have like a half and half section, like partially my stories and then some of their favorite stories too, and work it that way.
If you, I could see this being very successful. That you could actually wind up with a volume of books, whether it be 3, 5, 7 books, just a regular franchise, because you have all cops tell stories about where they've been, what they've seen, what they've done, just like preachers or plumbers or electricians, whatever's in their profession, whatever's in their trade, that they talk about it. And people write self-help books and stuff, and I have told people many times many of my stories. Some of them I tell very, very rarely because they're either graphic, but somebody's asked a specific question, and I said, well, I'll tell you, but it's very graphic. And that brings me to a side of law enforcement I really don't like, but it's absolutely necessary. And I'll try and tell you a 1-minute story here if you got a minute.
Sure.
On US 90, not too far out of Tallahassee, and this would have been about 1993, 1994, there was a man that came out of a club, and he had had too much to drink. I knew it. The number 4 man, let's see, I was the number 2 man, and he was the number 3 man. So anyway, we were on the Friday night or Saturday night on the all-night patrol. When I say all night, we were supposed to get off at 4 in the morning unless something was happening, but it always seemed to happen. We didn't get off till 8 or 9 in the morning. But be that as it may, this man, we tried to talk to him. We did not want to arrest him. We didn't want to detain him. We knew who he was and where he lived. And we said, let us get you a ride home. No, y'all going to get me in the back of that car and take me to the pokey. No, we're, you know us, we don't lie, we don't cheat, we don't steal. Our word is our bond, and we're straight. And you know that. Let us take you home. No, no, I want to walk home. Uh, and me and the third in command, we talked back and forth. We told him, uh, have a seat here. And me and him talked back and forth thinking, about public safety. What if he wandered out in the road? What if uh, somebody mugged him? Our duty and our responsibility to protect him to a point almost against himself. But if he's able to actually stand and walk and he's not staggering, but we know he's had too much to drink, but he's accustomed to it because he drinks a lot. If he says he refuses to go with us and he's not stumbling drunk, I think we're kind of in a bind here because he's saying he has his rights to be left alone and he wants us to leave him alone and he's making demand. I said, if we forcefully put him in the car and take him home, I guess he could file suit against us. And, we're trying to protect him and the court might go with us, but the court might say, he demanded his constitutional rights to be let alone. He wasn't committing a crime. He wasn't loud. He wasn't. So we said, okay, we're going to let you go. So we just got it made in our mind we were going to continuously make a loop. And this loop would be about 2.5 miles to make a loop around and around. So we kept coming by checking on him, and we'd see him walking 6 to 12 foot off the road. And then there was a gully there. So he was usually in the gully and would come by and would slow down and would say, you want to take you home? No, leave me alone. Said, well, heck, I hope we don't get in trouble for harassment, but we're just worried. So said, because if he gets out in the road, gets run over, then they're going to say, why didn't you do something? Well, he was demanding his constitutional rights, so that's that tight wire. We went around and around. We've been around about 12 times. The 13th time we come around, we didn't see him. We literally didn't see him. We said, wonder if he doubled back to the club. So we drove up to the club and we saw a car there, and the whole front windshield was smashed pretty hard. I mean, it was like in little crinkled pieces. And the manager at the club come running out and he said, this man here said he needs some help. He run over somebody. Oh, holy God. Where'd he run over him at? So he told us. So we took that guy in our police car. We went back to the scene of the accident, and he said, I hit him somewhere here. And this man's shoes was in the road. And I always heard about people getting hit so fast and so violently they actually came out of their shoes.
Yes, I have.
Yeah, this man's shoes was on the road. He was over in the gully because he had walked across the street, and the guy didn't see him. It was too dark where he was at, but he was headed towards the light at a gas station, and the guy hit him. And one of his legs, his whole body was together except for one of his legs. One of his legs was up there about, I don't know, maybe 80 or 100 foot up there. And when they went to roll him over, his insides just came out. And it was very horrific. I mean, I've been to some bad scenes, and I guess over the years I had learned to deal with it as best as you can. You ain't never gonna learn, but you do better after a while, I guess. Anyway, my number two, he had been in the military and he had seen a lot of things, but he hadn't seen nothing like this. And he actually said, I got to go. And I said, where are you going? I should have thought about it. He was up at the front of the patrol car getting sick.
Yes.
And he said, I'm sorry. And I said, sorry for what? For being a man? For being disturbed that somebody was killed traumatically? Run over by a car? So there's other ways to get killed with drinking and driving besides driving your car. You can be in a car with somebody else drinking. You can go off walking and drinking. I've heard of numerous people getting run over. In fact, in the Dallas Mesquite city limits sign, people's calling about a dog that had been run over in 78 or 79, I think it was, in the wintertime, that a dog had been run over. It was actually a man that had been run over in Mesquite or the Mesquite Dallas city limits, within a few foot, and he had been run over so many times, his body was everywhere. We had to get a body bag. We had Mesquite police in Dallas, and we had to get a body bag, or we had small bags, and we had to go out there with regular gloves. Back at that time, they ain't got gloves like they got now, and we had to pick up body parts and put them in these small bags, and they had to put them in a big bag. It looked like an animal had been run over. You couldn't tell it was a human being except for a few certain parts of the body.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a part. And so some of these young guys talk about, well, I didn't sign up for that. Yeah, you did. You signed up for whatever come your way. You didn't sign up to have a shiny badge and a new gun and a uptown police car and just cruise around and look like you're somebody. You're a public servant, and you got to take care of the people to the best of your ability and make sure that their rights are observed, and at the same time try and keep the peace. And that's why we were called peace officers.
Yes, sir.
And I still prefer that term. And in some places, the way some laws are written, and I've come to a conclusion. I've talked to other officers. They say, well, when you refer to yourself and other people refer to themselves as peace officers, there's a different mindset than law enforcement officer, because law enforcement officer is somebody that carries a book, knows it word for word, and is almost robotic, and it's like on a war footing, and they're out there looking for prey. Almost. Some of them actually, but peace officers are looking to keep the peace and tranquility of the community through constitutional means.
The name of the game is keep the peace, not fill up the jail.
Right, exactly. Now, I may want to do another interview with you in the coming weeks to maybe not what's in your book. We don't want to spoil it for nobody, but maybe we could have a cocktails conversation, and you could maybe share a couple of stories of interest with us. And what do you think?
I'd be glad to.
Okay. We thank you for this interview. We're at about 53 minutes. And I think interviews that are 1 hour or less are usually very informative and enlightening, but they don't stretch the human mind too far where you actually lose everybody. So I think we've done good, and I really appreciate you. And again, this is R.E. Phillips, retired peace officer, law enforcement in Central Alabama with 30 years of service. And his book is Pigtails, Stories in Law Enforcement. I will put a link up here where he can be seen. Thank you. God bless you and your family, to all of you out there. And God bless you, Mr. Phillips.
Thank you, Chief. Appreciate it.